everyone, thanks for joining me today. Are you ready to dig into a historical mystery? We're diving into the story of Joan of Arc.
And what a story it is.
She's one of those figures that just keeps attracting attention, centuries later, and people are still fascinated.
Yeah, she's got that pull, that's for sure. It's more than just the history books, too.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's the mystery that really gets people, was she really guided by something bigger than herself? Was she really a holy figure?
It's the question, isn't it? Saint or something else?
Right. So how do we even approach a question like that?
Well, we have to lay some groundwork first. We have to go back to her world, back to France in the 15th century.
Okay, so paint the picture for us.
All right, so it's the 1400s, right? And France, they're stuck in this horrible war with England.
100 Years' War, right?
Exactly, the 100 Years' War. And it's not just some border skirmish. It's brutal. It's chaos.
So not exactly a peaceful time to be alive.
No, not at all. Really picture this. You're in a small village, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is Domremy, where Joan grows up.
Yeah.
And all around you, it's war.
So she's growing up surrounded by this constant threat.
Exactly. And she's just a kid, 13 years old, when she starts talking about these visions.
This is the part that always gets me. The visions.
Oh, yeah.
Like, here's this young girl, and she's claiming to see angels, saints,
Powerful stuff, right?
Yeah.
And she doesn't just see them. She says they talk to her.
And tell her to do what exactly?
To support Charles VII. He's the uncrowned king, see? And these visions, they tell Joan she has to help him reclaim the throne.
So to lead France to victory, basically.
Basically, yeah. Imagine being 13 and getting those kind of instructions.
Talk about pressure, right? But that's what makes it so believable to some, who would make that up?
That's the thing about Joan. People said that from the very beginning.
But it couldn't have been easy for those around her at first.
I'm sure they had their doubts.
Yeah, you think. It's not every day a teenage girl rocks up saying she's got God on speed dial.
You're telling me. It makes you wonder what it was about Joan that made people eventually believe her, right?
Yeah, what was it about her?
Well, charisma only gets you so far, right? Joan had this uncanny ability to inspire people. She was deeply religious herself.
Right. It wasn't an act.
No, not at all. She fully believed what she was saying. And that resonated, especially back then. France, they were desperate.
For a miracle, pretty much.
Yeah, for something to believe in. And Joan, she offered that. She was young, she was passionate, and she was telling them God was on their side.
Talk about a morale boost.
Oh, absolutely. Here comes this young woman saying, God's got our back. Let's go get it.
I can see how that would be convincing, for sure. But she also won battles, right? You can't ignore that.
No, you can't. And that's the thing about Joan. It's not just the visions. It's what she did with them. Take Orleans, for example. Major turning point in the war.
And Joan's right in the thick of it.
Right there with them, leading the charge. That's what made her so different. She wasn't hiding behind some fancy title. She was right there in the trenches.
So she walks the walk, too.
Oh, she absolutely walks the walk. And I think that's a huge part of what makes her story so compelling. But here's the thing. Some say, well, she had help, right? Like, she wasn't a military strategist by training.
She had advisors, right? People like Jean de Dunois.
Exactly. Experienced military minds. And that's where it gets really interesting, right? Because we can acknowledge her impact, her inspiration, but also recognize
that she wasn't operating in a vacuum.
Yeah, it's like how much was divine guidance and how much was just good strategy,
And we'll probably never know for sure.
Probably not, but it's fun to think about.
It is. So we've got Joan leading armies, winning battles, but it doesn't exactly end well, does it?
No, it doesn't.
There's that whole blood at the stake thing.
Yeah, about that.
Talk about a fall from grace. How do you go from liberating cities to being executed for heresy?
Well, that's where the politics of the time really come into play. Remember, it's still the 100 Years' War, the stakes are high, and Joan, she's a simple...
Yeah, French resistance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to the English and their allies, she's a major threat, a rallying point for the opposition.
So they needed her gone.
Let's just say it was in their best interest for her not to be running around, winning battles and inspiring the French troops.
So the trial, it was more about politics than religion.
To a large degree, yeah.
Yeah.
Joan, she was captured by the Burgundians. They were allied with the English, and they handed her over.
Setting the stage for the trial.
The trial itself, it was a whole thing. They accused her of heresy, but
right.
A lot of it, when you look at the charges, it's about her clothes, her visions.
What do you mean her clothes?
Well, they made a big deal about her wearing men's clothing, said it was proof of her heresy.
Really? She was leading armies.
I know, right? But back then, It was a huge social taboo. They used it against her, twisted it to fit their narrative.
So it was like they were looking for any excuse to get rid of her,
It seems that way, yeah. I mean, they needed something to stick, something to justify.
condemning her.
Exactly. And tragically, they found it.
And she was only 19, right?
19 years old when they burned her at the stake. I mean, can you imagine?
It's hard to fathom, really. It's even harder when you consider what happens next. Here we have this woman, condemned as a heretic, executed in the most brutal way, and then centuries later, the church declares her a saint.
It's quite the turn of events, isn't it? It really makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About how we decide who's a hero and who's a villain, who's a saint and who's a heretic.
Right, because those lines, they're not always so clear.
Not at all. And in Joan's case, it took centuries for her image to be, rehabilitated.
What do you mean?
Well, think about it. She was found guilty by the church, branded a heretic. To undo that, that's a big deal.
So how did it happen?
It was a slow process, lots of debate. It wasn't until the late 1800s that people really started pushing to clear her name.
Why then? What changed?
Nationalism, mostly. France, they were still hurting after the Franco-Prussian War. They needed something to rally around.
And Joan, the warrior, the symbol of French resistance, she fit the bill.
Exactly. Suddenly, Joan's story wasn't just history. It was this powerful symbol of French pride,
So they used her story to boost national morale.
In a way, yes. And that paved the way for her canonization in 1920.
I mean, that timing is pretty convenient, right? Right after World War I.
You can't deny the political context, that's for sure.
So her sainthood, it was more about politics than actual holiness.
I wouldn't say that exactly. I think it's more complicated than that. Look, there were definitely political factors at play, no doubt about it, but I also think there was a genuine reverence for Joan.
You think so?
Oh, absolutely. Her faith, her courage, her determination, those things are undeniable. Even her critics admit that.
So how do we reconcile these two sides of the story? The political maneuvering and the genuine reverence.
I think that's the beauty of it. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be both. Joan's story, it's a reminder that history is messy. It's complicated.
It's always black and white.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes it so fascinating. Joan's story, it challenges us to think critically, to question the narratives we're given.
To look beyond the easy answers.
Exactly. So the next time someone asks you, was Joan of Arc a saint? Don't be afraid to say, well, it's complicated.
I like that. It's complicated. It's a good way to sum up not just Joan's story, but history in general, wouldn't you say?
I think so. And that's all the time we have for today.
We've been digging into the life and legacy of Joan of Arc, a woman who continues to fascinate and challenge us centuries later.
From peasant girl to military leader, from condemned heretic to canonized saint.
Joan's story is a testament to the enduring power of belief, the complexities of history,
and the importance of never, ever stopping questioning.
So until next time, keep exploring, keep asking those tough questions.
And we'll see you in the next deep dive.